All right, good evening, everybody, and hello to Jackie and Linda. It's nice to have you up here. I wanted to start off, and Jackie, you kind of just talked about it, but what was it like finding out the news that you had been, for both of you, being nominated and then, of course, having won? Like, what were just those initial thoughts and feelings?
Oh, man, it was a whole pandemic ago, right? I want to ask Juliet, but I think I screamed, when I found out. I think the nomination the second time, it was, oh, yay, they nominated me again. Maybe this time I'll make the short list. And so when I found out I had actually won, it was pretty unbelievable. So but at the same time, I feel like so many people in this room I've known for so many decades, because I'm old, and it just feels like the family had come together to rally around me to make this thing happen, and so it felt pretty good. It feels really good to have this kind of family out in the world.
Linda, how about you?
Well, I guess you could say I'm still processing. It's just sort of, so there's one nominee every year, every 2 years?
Every 2 years.
One nominee every 2 years. And you know how many great children's writers there are in this country?
Yeah.
And then it's just like, and it's so, one of the things that's most meaningful for me is that, as we've been discovering in many unfortunate ways over the past few years, Asian Americans are still not seen as American by a lot of people. We're still seen as somehow being foreign. And so I am the U.S. nominee, the American nominee. The first... There have been a couple of Asian illustrators, but I'm the first author. The first. And so, I mean, I'm getting a little teary here because it's just hard to express. Mm-hmm. How much that means and how incredible that is. So I didn't even know there was a short list. So now I'm going to obsess about that. But but no, it truly is. One of those times when it's just like it's just amazing to be nominated. And I think the days where I might have dreamed of being an Olympian are over. But curling, every Winter Olympics, I think I could do curling. but this is the closest. Representing the this is the closest I'm ever going to get to being an Olympian.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so you both have had careers that have spanned decades, and this award being a very prestigious and high honor, what is the legacy that you both hope to leave behind with your body of work?
Have you thought about this? What your legacy is?
Oh,
I just said to Juliet, she got nothing left to win. Right?
I think it's so interesting. When I started out doing this, it was because there was this gap in that world where my existence should have been, right? I would look at these books and as a kid and say, where am I? Where are the people I love? Where's my family? Where's my existence in literature? So trying to fill that hole. And I think I feel like I've done that, right? I've written a lot of books, and because I've written these books, other people have been inspired to write their books. So I do feel like I'm living the legacy, and I've done the work. I always think of Audre Lorde, who said, we should wake up knowing we have work to do and go to bed knowing we've done that work. And I do feel like at this point I've done that work. And now I'm reaping the benefits of seeing people like Jacqueline, of seeing young writers, of seeing new books, of being able to walk into a bookstore and see all these people of different colors, to see trans people, to see queer people, to see all of these ways in which narratives exist that didn't exist 30 years ago. So.
And I guess I think about what books meant to me when I was a kid. And of course, I grew up in the Stone Age, and I didn't have the digital entertainment that they have now. So books were everything. They were just so much for me. And I remember the very first time there was a boy named Daniel. He had a Latinx or Latin surname. And he stood in a very long line on a really hot day waiting to get his copy of A Single Shard signed. And when he reached me, he said, "I can't believe I'm meeting my favorite author," right? And then he showed me the inside of his book cover, and it had these hash marks. And he said, "I found out a couple of months ago that you were coming to this festival and that I was going to get to meet you, so I started to keep track of the number of times I have read this book. But I lost count around 60. And even now, I get chills down my spine when I think of that. And the fact that one of my books meant something to a young reader the way other people's books had meant to me. And also, he's like this, I really do think about him with every book I write. And I think this sentence has to be worth reading 60 times. So yeah, he inspires me every time I write. So
great. That's amazing.
Yes.
That really is wonderful. I really would like to talk about in your work, intersectionality. And for a refresher, Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality around how race, class, gender, sexuality, and other identities intersect. And in your books, has there ever been a point where you had intentional intersectionality or any unintentional intersectionality?
First and foremost, I want to thank you for citing Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, because I think a lot of times, especially women and especially Black women, go uncited, and so thank you for that. I think it's I'm an intersectional person. So of course that's going to move into my literature. I can't imagine it. I was, our daughter went off to Howard and I don't remember how she phrased it, but she's like, there are a lot of families where they're all the same race. And it was kind of surprising for her. And I think of that because we have the family that we have. And I've lived the life I've lived, that all of those places that I exist will end up in the narrative in some way, shape, or form. So is it intentional? Yes. Is it not intentional? Yes.
And for me, I've had such a journey of learning, from being raised in an immigrant family where the object was to become as American as we possibly could, and where the dominant culture's mores were what we were trying to achieve. And there was this false bargain offered out. If you will be the model minority, we will accept you as Americans. And it turned out that was not the case at all. That was a complete falsehood, right? But I guess what I'm learning, and I'm learning all the time, this is very un-Korean of me because Jackie is younger than I am, but she's always been one of my mentors, right? You're not supposed to do that in Korea. They're supposed to be older than you, but anyhow, there's been so many people that I've learned from, right? And one of the things that I've come to realize is that everybody is intersectional, right? Nobody's one thing. But it's the awareness of your intersectionality and how that fits into your community, your society, your whole culture, your whole the world. To start with, if you, for example, in a lot of circles are identify as female, that's automatically an identity thing that's going to intersect with other things that you are, right? So that we're all intersectional, but some of us are forced to think or confront our identities in ways that others are not.
I think along those lines, another question I have is, of course, in the past year and a half, probably even more than that, we've seen a rise in misinformation around critical race theory and the like. And this, of course, has caused an uptick in book banning, book burning, and censorship. And that's going to, of course, lead to more division. So from an author standpoint, where do we go from here? I don't. We can always skip that one. We can come back to it, or we can just skip it.
Can we ask the audience? It's so you.
I feel that this wave is scarier. I have not before seen librarians worry about their jobs. And that feels different to me, doesn't it?
And it's also legislated, in a way that it wasn't before.
Right.
So, yeah.
My son, who is, sort of left of wherever left is, he's like, we just have to hang on until the demographics, get to the point where we, and I'm like, well, that's depressing, and he's like, no, because we have to do the work now because we have to lay the groundwork. They're going to be ready. We're working now to lay the groundwork for when the demographics are set. I mean, maybe that's, I don't know. Sometimes I think that's what it's got to be.
It's interesting. Toshi, not Toshi, our daughter, but Toshi, my bestie and the kid's godmom, she said that this country right now is like an abusive lover, and you're trying to leave it, right? So the white supremacy is the abusive lover, right? And as the demographics change, as we start speaking out more, as there more resistance start happening, it gets more violent, right? Because it's like, how dare you try to leave the way that this country has always been, and it is in that sense where we are now, right? We're in that point where there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of gaslighting, and a lot of lying, a lot of false, all of these ways in which that abusive lover is saying, you are not going to leave me. And at the end, we'll get out of there. I am optimistic that on the other end of this is a very different America. And that's what the fear is right now.
We can go into some lighter questions. Let's see, which one was here? Oh, yes. What book of your own have you been thinking about recently? Like, what book of their own have they been thinking about recently? One that's been previously published.
Oh, okay. So, I guess it changes day to day, right? I mean, the most read book of mine is A Long Walk to Water, which is weird because it's a complete aberration for me, right? That was a sort of gift book that fell into my lap because I'm close friends with the protagonist of the book, and I was sort of just a little bit more than his typist, but that's basically what I did, And in fact, I wanted the book cover to say A Long Walk to Water by Salva Dute with Linda Sue Park. That's how I styled the manuscript. And when it was published, for various reasons, Salva said, I don't want my name on the cover. Yeah, so that was his decision and his choice. And to this day, I still want to say, no, it should say, it was his story. Anyhow, so I think about that one a lot because I'm asked about it a lot, where I go. It happens to be the 100th anniversary of the Newbery this year, and the 20th anniversry of the Newbery for A Single Shard.
Wow.
So I've been asked about that one as different, ALA and others are celebrating that 100th year. And then, of course, you're always thinking about your latest books, and most of all about the one you're working on right now, right? That's the one.
It's so funny because when you asked that, the book that came to mind was Bibimbap. So, because I was going through my picture books and trying to decide what books I was going to give away. And it's like, not this one. This book has brought our family so many, decades of joy. So, and then I just opened it and started reading it like, Harry, mommy, Harry, time to chop, chop, chop. But I don't know. I think in this moment in time, for me, I think of Harbor Me a lot. I think of that book about these young people taking care of each other in a difficult time. It's not at the forefront of my mind, but it's something that I come back to and think, okay, Harbor Me, Harbor Me.
Great. What are some amazing ways you've seen educators and librarians use your books?
Well, I love the table decorations. One. That's a hard one for me.
With A Long Walk to Water, what I had hoped is that they would see Salva Dute as one person making a difference, that sort of thing, and that is not what happened. I just did not expect that and teachers say that it is largely student-led, that they would say, what can we do? And they have had bake sales and penny drives and wishing wells and walkathons, and they have raised money for Salva's organization. And at last count, they had raised altogether more than $4 million.
Wow.
All of that going to build wells in South Sudan. So there are now literally millions of people who have clean water from students all over the world, but mostly here in the United States, because they read A Long Walk to Water. And that's just, that's, talk about another gift.
Wow.
That people's lives are being changed because these fifth graders in, Ohio and Wyoming and other places like that are saying, what can we do to help, people like Nya and Salva, and they raise money, and that's been amazing.
Wow, that's so amazing. That's so fabulous.
And of course the teachers, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for teachers to get involved in this, and they do it.
Oh, the penny drive, that way your hand smell. Right? I remember the penny drives. There's a lot of coins to handle, and the little sweaty kid hands, with so much love bringing their pennies in. Oh, bless their hearts. It's amazing. I think that just the mere fact, I know you know that I have a bunch of books on challenged books list, and I think the resistance for so many teachers is to not even mention that, but to share the book with their students and let the conversations begin. I found that so much with Brown Girl Dreaming. I found that so much with Each Kindness. I found that so much with The Day You Begin and Harbor Me. These letters I get about the conversations that are being had and the way that echoes out into the bigger world and the greater good, and how these young people begin to think about, again, empathy and their impact on the world, and just that, just from that single story and the teacher-led conversations, or sometimes not even the teacher-led conversations, but the fact that the teacher was proactive enough to bring that book into the room and say, hey, let's read this.
That is, again, to my surprise and delight, happening with my latest book, which is called The One Thing You'd Save, which is a very short book. And a teacher says to her students, imagine there's a fire in your home. Your family and pets are all safe. What is the one thing you would save? And I have had so many incredibly moving letters from teachers saying, I'm using this as a discussion thing. I'm using it as a writing prompt. And with this one question, I have gotten to know my students better in one session than I had all year before this, because it's different from saying, tell me something about yourself. It's saying, tell me about one thing, and then what's the story behind that thing? Why is that important to you? And there have been so many sort of real life, all the different fires that have been happening because of climate change, and that people have really had to abandon their houses and pick up, And just recently, in I think the Washington Post, they interviewed a dozen people leaving Ukraine. And what is the one thing that they grabbed from their houses? So that teachers have been able to link up the book to things that are happening to real people. But it's just been so moving to hear these teachers say, my kids they grasp onto this concept, and I've had the best discussions with them based around, one thing, so, yeah.
What kind of things did they say?
Well, if they haven't been given the pets are safe, they all save a pet. But if you say that the pets are okay, that the pets are fine, they save all kinds of things. They save the phone a lot of times, right? That's very practical, but they save a lot of sentimental things. And you think that kids maybe aren't old enough to have a lot of stuffed animals, a lot of favorite childhood books, even though you could buy another one,
Wow.
So but then the thing is to say why they saved that, and so that's where you learn about the person. So yeah.
I was in a fire many years ago. I was teaching at a writing camp for young people, and we were at Bennington. It was Bennington, I think it was at Bennington. And it was so funny because it was me, Norma Fox Mazer, Cornelius Edie, and Kamiko Hahn. I had Toshi. I had our daughter, who was a baby at the time. And did I have our dog with us? I feel like I had one of our dogs with us. And we had previously been staying in like dorms at Simon's Rock, and so we got this really nice house, and in the middle of the night it caught on fire, and so I grabbed my daughter, I grabbed a blanket for her because it was cold, I grabbed the dog, I might have grabbed my computer, but this one guy in the house came out, all he had grabbed was his scale. We never figured it out. Yes. His scale. Yeah, that you weigh yourself. Exactly. And that's all he came out of the place with was his scale.
You see, I'd like to hear the story behind that.
I know, we never understood it, and he wouldn't admit why he saved his scale. So, but literally, that's all he walked out of the building with. Sorry.
So funny. That is so funny. I'd love to hear more about that from his perspective. We wanted to leave time for some audience questions, so this will be my last one. So I teach 5th grade, and so they have a question for you both, and it is, where do you get your inspiration?
Not the pandemic.
Does anybody have a book? Not a picture book. I want to. No, not illustrated. Sorry, I want an unillustrated, like a chapter book or a novel. No, it's okay.
Oh, I love how everyone has the one thing you saved.
Go ahead. Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's good.
Oh, thank you.
So, okay, this is what I say to the 5th grade, right? Okay, so I say, if you look at a book, not a picture book, not an illustrated book, what your eyes are actually seeing is a white rectangle with a bunch, row after row after row of teeny tiny black squiggles. That is what your eyes actually see. White rectangle, black squiggles. But if you know how to read, you look at the squiggles, and a second later you're like, that's funny. Or you can be like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? You can even be really sad. I think my heart is breaking. You're not watching people on a screen. You're not even seeing any images. You're looking at little black squiggles. Okay, so first of all, that's like magic, right? That's like magic. And if you are a writer, so this is what inspires me, it's also power. I don't know you. You live hundreds of miles away from me. I can make you cry using just black squiggles. That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so especially for many of us, I think this is true of many writers, who grew up like a lot of kids feeling pretty powerless. Mm-hmm. And you add marginalization to that, and geez, to find this source of power, that is very inspiring.
Mm-hmm. It is so true. I love that. I'm going to use that then.
Yeah, please.
So. I completely agree with what Linda Sue says, and the ideas come from everywhere, right? They come from those black squiggles. They come from everything we touch and everything we see, everything we hear, and it's just a question of walking through the world with your eyes open. Look up. Don't look down at your phone. Look up, and the story is out there. And just let go of the fear of telling it. I always say when I write, I always start with no one is ever going to see this. So what would you write if no one was ever going to see it? If you could just tear it up and throw it away, what would that writing on the page look like? Because it is just a question of unlocking the narrative.
That's fantastic. I know they'll appreciate that answer. All right. So we'd love to open it up for the last few minutes. And Ellen has a microphone if you have a question.
So Darby's going to help me on that side.
Oh, great.
Anybody has a question over here? Raise your hand.
Grab my water for me.
And nothing you can ask us is wrong.
I see some over there.
Okay. Hi. Thank you both so much. This is amazing.
Right there in the book.
Just considering where we are and who we're with, what other parts of the world, I'm just curious, do your books find real resonance? They are beloved here. Where else do you find a very strong response?
Korea.
Same. It's so funny. Yeah, a lot of Asia for me.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of Asia, and of course Sweden because of the Astrid Lindgren Award. But I think Asia is one of my Japan, China, and Korea, and of course Europe.
Not that many of my books are available in translation, with the exception of A Long Walk to Water, which is in something like 26 different languages, now, which is really exciting. And then A Single Shard has a few translations, but not all that many. So with A Long Walk to Water, it's been really, really exciting to see it available. And then they come to you, and you're like, you don't recognize the language. So did I really write this?
You have to look inside, and it's like, oh yeah, Russia.
Yeah.
Or Juliet can translate it for me, but.
But the whole issue of translation, as Ibby knows, is a fascinating one. When my books are translated in Korea, the translator contacts me constantly saying, did you mean this or did you mean this? And trying to figure out and someone who was bilingual once read the Korean version of Single Shard and said, it is very faithful to your words and there is no poetry. There's no music, there's no rhythm, because they decided to stick with. So that's really interesting, right? And then in France, they did whatever the hell they wanted. They changed his name. Yeah. They didn't ask me a single thing. Yes. It's so French, isn't it? Yeah. So different. But I'm always really fascinated by, and I'm very grateful to USBBY and to IBBY for their work in bringing some of these great books from other countries here, because it's so frustrating, especially when the Lindgren or the Hans Christian, and I've never heard of the person, that really pisses me off.
Yeah.
It's like, if they're that good, I should know them.
Yeah.
Right?
Angus and I were just talking about that, about you just bought a book from someone who had won the Hans Christian Andersen Award, right? And the fact that we don't know the people who are not from this country who've won these awards is a travesty.
So visit the exhibits.
Yes,
Right?
I want to say something about Jackie.
No, Linda's standing.
20 years ago, she came to our university with baby Toshi, and she talked with our students for a couple of days. Now, these were master's students studying children's literature, and they were required to read 3 of her books, at least 3.
Oakland University.
Yeah. And at the end of the second day, one of the women came up to Jackie and said, I've really got to talk to you. I've read your books. Do you remember this? And she said, I'm afraid of my son is questioning his sexuality, and I don't know how to talk to him about it. And Jackie sat down with her for at least 20 minutes and talked to her and gave her lists of books. And I've told that story so many times in my classes over the years. And I was so grateful for you talking to her and telling her how to handle this situation that she just was at a loss to talk about. And I think when you ask that question about what's the legacy of their books, this is one of the legacies that I feel very close to. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. But also, I just want to throw that right back at you. Keep in mind, 20 years ago, I was not Jacqueline Woodson, and you invited me to Oakland University. You and Jim had the faith in me to come there with a baby in tow, and because of that, I was able to have that conversation. So I'm grateful to y'all.
It's always, I'm always moved by that, right? The people who showed their faith in you before. Right? Barbara Scotto is here. She was one of my great supporters before.
Yes.
So.
We see you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, one back there.
So, first of all, just gratitude. It's one thing to be moved by your books. It's another thing to be moved by the people behind the books. So thank you for being here and sharing what you shared.
Thanks, Zach.
The question I have for you is, as an aspiring, picture book author myself, how do you know when a book is done?
When your editor says, no, you may not have another extension.
Yeah.
Right? It's never done. It's just abandoned or whatever. I mean, I actually seldom read my published books because I see things that I would change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not huge things, but just, oh God, that's a horrible sentence.
I change them as I'm reading the published book. You know, so I always tell people, don't read along with me because you're going to think I made a mistake, but I'm just editing.
Oh my God.
Yes. So
I'm stealing that.
I do think that, you know, the thing you ask yourself as a writer is, what is your book trying to say and how is it saying it? You don't ask what it's about, right? What is this book trying to say? And when you get to that last line and you exhale, you know, and you're like, I said it. I mean, I think Juji's going to be talking tomorrow, and she can talk more about it, especially in terms of picture books. But I do feel like when it's right, you know it. When you get to that last line and you're like, yes, this line feels like the end of the book, then that book is ready to move on to the next place, to that person who's your editor who says, this is a great beginning. You know? Then it starts all over again.
And I think that every book is different. Mm-hmm. You know, every book, for me, teaches me how to write that book. Mm-hmm. And it's next to useless for the next one. But what does grow, I think, is your confidence.
Yeah, definitely.
That even when you're mired in the worst possible, I'm going to throw this away and never write again and start looking at the want ads for other jobs. Even at those moments, there's something in the back of you that says, I've done this before, mm-hmm. you know, and I can do it again. So, but I think every book is, you know, some books take a relatively shorter time, and some books are just, you know, tear your hair out and take forever. And it's, I don't know, it's just not the kind of thing. It's not like muscle memory, I don't think, like in sports. At least me, I have not gotten better at it. I have not gotten better at figuring writing out. It's always a pain in the whatever.
But also because we're writing something different each time. You know, we don't write series. Each book is its own journey. So yeah, then we have to figure that one out.
And for Jackie, because I copied her, as I said, she's a mentor. You know, no, seriously, you know, I saw that she was writing YA, she was writing middle grade, she was writing picture books, and I'm like, that's how I read. Can you do that? Yeah, she's doing it. I'm good. I'm going to try. And so it is different, and you know, and that's what keeps it fresh for me. Publishers would love to be able to brand you and say this is how you, you know, but I'm like, but Jackie, you know.
That's great. There's a hand right there.
This is a question for Linda Sue. I saw on social media that you said you had trouble writing during the COVID lockdown and you were playing a lot with your grandchildren. How did that change, or how were you able to overcome the paralysis of, and right. Why also? I mean, obviously why, right. But maybe elaborate.
I can't answer that entirely because the paralysis is not yet left yet. But at the beginning of the pandemic, do you remember that horrible nightmare? I was homeschooling the grandchildren. Does anybody remember? Oh, my God. It was so horrible. And that lasted just a couple of months, and then they eventually went back to partial school, and then I was helping them with virtual school. And so that was what, February or March, and through the end of the year, end of the school year, that was just lost time. In other words, there was not a single word written. Because this homeschooling thing, oh my God, teachers and people who homeschool, I mean, I would just they would get picked up by their parents at 5 o'clock, and I would just collapse. You know, I was so exhausting. Anyhow, so then I was like, I need the summer to rest. and then, yes. But I think, like a lot of people, I did have pandemic brain, or whatever you want to call it, and I wasn't even reading. So that was really hard because reading is such a wellspring for me. And I couldn't focus on, you know, so I was watching television and I was playing stupid games on my phone. And trying to, you know, I don't even know how many books I picked up and read a few pages and put down again, you know. So fortunately, I did have I had a couple of deadlines for short stories for anthologies and some poetry projects. And so that kept me from completely going off, you know, the rails. But I'm still not back. I'm definitely still, I'm hoping this is going to help, you know, just sort of this feeling of, you know, being with all my family again and seeing people that I need to see every once in a while to feel more like myself. I also have a very exciting project that I'm not allowed to announce yet, but you will all hear about it within a month or so. And so that's been another thing that's helped me. But I'm still not back to writing and, to writing a big project. I hope I will be, but I'm trying not to put pressure on myself. We all need grace for this last couple of years that we've been through. And so I think a couple of years of grace is long enough, for God's sake, but I'm still trying to extend that grace to myself and to the people around me.
I think, wait, one more question right over here.
Hi. I just spent last night with my son who has just completed writing his first book. And you made me think of this with your conversation. We were just talking about if he finds an editor. I said, how will you feel if they really want to change your storyline a different direction or really have a grave differences other than just grammatical and so on? And so I wondered how you both feel about that. You said France changes your book, but what about in the United States? With editors and suggestions.
When I wrote Last Summer with Mason, which was my first novel, I had an editor who kept changing her mind, right? I'd write it one way and she'd say, well, I think it needs to be, and I didn't know, so I didn't know I could say no to my editor. I didn't know that she didn't know more than I did about the narrative. So I kept changing it back and forth, and then she finally quit. And then the book sat on the shelf a while, and then I got my editor, who was my editor for a long time, Wendy Lamb, and with her, the book finally got published. But it wasn't until my second book that I really knew what I was trying to say, and I would push back against my editor. I would say, at that same time, I know for sure that an editor only wants your book to be better. So a lot of times you meet your editor at the first before they buy your book, and they talk about the book, and you see that you're on the same page. So once you have established that relationship, then you're going to trust that person's edits to make your book better.
Yeah, I agree. I think the trust thing is huge, which you don't know the person at first, so, but I also think that, and this might actually be a weakness for me, I thought about this a lot, but I think that there are a million ways to write a good story, right? And you could choose this, or you could choose this, or you could choose this. So my way is A, and the editor suggests B. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, but I trust her. So I try B. I try it. I give it my honest, good shot. And that's not over a whole novel, but it's like a chapter, okay, a few pages of a character, and I really do try it, okay? So I would say that 70% of the time what happens is that I end up with C, something better than either, which I could not have gotten to had I not given B an honest shot. Now, maybe 30% of the time, I was right. No, this is not working. Your suggestion is not working. I'm going to go back to A, but I'm going to make it clearer and better so that you can actually see what I was really trying to do there. So in both cases, the editor is helping me make my book better. But I either end up at C or I end up making A better, right? But if it's a trusted editor, a trusted reader, I try their suggestion. So I think other writers sometimes say, no, this is me, this is my way or the highway kind of thing. Some? No? Yeah?
I'm not friends with them.
Okay.
Okay, well, we could listen to you all talk all night, but we probably should go to sleep at some point.